Okay. So, Nyssa, I have to say you are, I don't want to jump the gun here, but it sounds like you're a workaholic. I mean, this is crazy. How are you working full-time in an ER and working as a clinical instructor, working in the ICU, working at the bird? How, and now you have a podcast for, this is insane. All right. So, so let's take this one step at a time, because this is a lot. All right. So the thing that I always worry about, because you're right, I never had a practicum. I never had a clinical rotation. I never even what's it called? Shadowed a nurse in the ER. The only time I've ever been in the ER is when I got my job at a cardiac floor, and part of our orientation on the cardiac floor, they want to send you one day to just shadow a nurse in the ER, one day shadow a nurse in the ICU. So I got to do that. And you were right. Slap in the face. It is absolutely nuts, crazy, mind-blowing going downstairs in the ER and seeing how these nurses handle everything that just gets thrown at them 24/7. So how, Nyssa, as a new grad, did you go from, I don't know how to put an IV in, I don't know what meds to give, I don't even know what pill this is, to working in the ER, the most hectic, craziest place I've ever seen? Tell me that process, because that sounds like a huge leap of faith.
It is a huge leap. It is throwing you into the deep end of the pool for sure. It's probably a good thing that new grads don't know what they don't know when they start there. It's probably a good thing that new grads don't understand how sick some of these patients are or could be very quickly. So it is a trick, and it's not for everybody, and it's not for every new grad. You know, I had very good preceptors. I had a great educator who, and mentors, charge nurses who were used to, welcomed new grad nurses and were used to teaching us and easing us into it. I will say, when you go down to the ER as a new grad, and even probably a transfer from another area, you're not going to be the trauma nurse for the first year. They're not going to put you as the triage nurse for the first year. You will be in the med-surg area. You'll be caring for anywhere from 3 to 5 patients, kind of getting your foundation and your feet under you. And then once they realize that you've got a good foundation, you understand what sick is, you can recognize it pretty quickly, then you start rotating to the critical care area. Then you start holding the trauma phone. Then you start going out to triage. So it is a stepwise process, but it's a tough place for new grads. It's a great place, but it's tough.
The thing is, it sounds to me like you really enjoyed, so when you got hired at your job, did you check the box, I want to work in the ER? Like, that's a possibility? Or was that the first job offer, and like every new grad nurse, you jump at the opportunity? Did you choose it, or did it literally just be the only option they gave you?
So we had this super, super cool program that was called a critical care nurse residency. So this is for people who can't exactly decide what they want to be when they grow up. So I interviewed for the critical care nurse residency, and I interviewed for L&D because that was,
Yep.
So I did take the residency, and what that meant was I got to spend a month in every one of the adult ICUs, and then a month in the ER. And then at the end, so at the beginning, it means that every one of those directors had to say, yeah, I would hire you. And then at the end, it means that you pick then which one you fit into best. And so as I rotated from neuro to med-surg to CV to trauma and then down to the ER, I loved them all. I wanted to know it all, do it all, see it all. And but that's not how real life works. So you have to make a decision.
Of course.
ER was the place where I could see pediatrics, I could see geriatrics, I could see hearts, I could see brains, I could see psych, a little bit of all of that. And so that's where I ended up landing. But that's also how I got that rotation where I could work in the ICUs as my overtime, because I had done that residency. So that's why I kept on. I said, I just want to keep rotating forever. But the way that I did it was I stayed in the ER and then did my overtimes in the ICU. And honestly, I went to the ICUs because it made me a better ER nurse. Having those drips, having those vents, getting a little bit more exposure and a little bit more depth than you would in the ER, it made me a better ER nurse. So
yeah, of course, right? So I'm just going to jump right back in. And what I was saying is I really like the way you described that, because I have that itch where I want to try many, many different things, right? But I want to get your honest opinion. You seem like you were an adult when you became a nurse, right? When you switched your career to become a nurse. Would you advise new grads, would you advise new nurses to jump in the deep end and go straight to the ED? Because I do have that itch, but I'm also really afraid, because I do get nervous, and it is a shell shock, and it is very, very, very different than working on the floor. And we'll get to the differences between the ICU and the ER in a bit, but would you advise new nurses, new grads, to start out in the ED, ER, or do you think that they should start out on a med-surg floor?
Yeah, that's a great question. I freaking love that question. So here's why I love that is I love the ER. It's a huge passion of mine. And so I thought that everyone else would have that same feeling about it. So when I was the educator in the department, I recruited hard. I would go down to the cafeteria. I would see a table full of student nurses, and I would go over to them and be like, who wants to go to the ER? Who doesn't know what they want to be when they grow up? Let me sell it to you. It's so great. And I would tell them all the wonderful things about it. Leave out some of the downsides,
Of course.
and any chance I had in front of a student or a nurse, if I could snatch someone from the heart tower or steal someone from ICU and recruit them away, I would do it. And there was a nurse who, a young lady who I knew. I have known her whole life since she was a little girl. Super smart, hilarious, has the same kind of humor and really similar personality to me. Love her. And I was like, you have to be an ER nurse. You've got to come and be one of us. And she was ready, hook, line, and sinker. She was sold. And she got into the ER and she absolutely hated it. And I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that it wouldn't click for everyone. But it doesn't. It clicks for a lot of people. It's a good place for a lot of people, but it is not for everyone. And we would hire about 8 new grads at a time, and 1 or 2 of them would end up someplace else. By the end of orientation, they would find that it just wasn't what they thought it was. The other 6, it would be home. It would click. I will also say that while it is a deep learning curve for new grads, it can be done with the right preceptors, the right educators, the right system in place. When we have nurses who have a med-surg foundation or an ICU foundation, and they decide they want to put a toe into the ER and see what it's like, they do very well oftentimes. Very, very well, because they have time management down, they've got assessment skills down, and they can then adapt to the chaos. So oftentimes when they come with a few years of med-surg experience, they do very, very well transitioning.
Okay. Yeah. And
you should come down. You should totally come.
Nyssa, you better believe I'll be there. Just give me a couple more months, maybe years, but I'll be there.
Come on now. Come on.